Good evening, everybody. I would like to welcome Chartered Trustees to this meeting of Bournemouth Chartered Trustees and to the press and members of the public. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules for speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand physically to indicate. Councillors, officers, members of the public and the press in attendance are recommended to wear face coverings whilst moving around. If you wish to remove while seated, please feel free to do so, as I will not be wearing one either. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there are any dissensions. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands. Councillors are advised that there is no live stream of this meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies. Honorary Clerk, will you please report apologies?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies have been received from Councillor Hazel Allen, Councillor Sarah Anderson, Councillor Simon Bull, Councillor Beverley Dunlop, Councillor George Farquhar. Sorry, I have a hand up. Sorry, Councillor Andy Jones, and Councillor Mike Green and Councillor Nicola Green, Councillor Mohan Iyengar, Councillor Lisa Lewis, Councillor Lisa Northover, and Councillor Kieran Wilson.
And is Richard here? Yeah, as well. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Moving on, agenda item 2, declarations of interests. Honorary Clerk, can you report of any declarations of interest received?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None have been received to date.
Thank you. And confirmation of minutes and matters arising. Chartered Trustees are asked to receive the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of October 21 and to consider any matters arising. Are there any matters arising, please? Members agree to sign the minutes? Thank you. And agenda item 4, Chartered Mayor's Report. I can report that since October of last year, I've done several events, including awards at the Sea Cadets at TS Phoebe, Arts About Culture in Boscombe, the Music Library opening, a talk to the Royal Tank Regiment, Chest Help Samaritans, the Remembrance Parades. I've cycled dressed as a bear for children in need. Been to Winchester to the Cathedral for the laying down of the colours for the Princess of Wales Regiment. We've done the opening of the Christmas Tree Wonderland, the chiropractic ceremony for their graduates, tree planting, World AIDS Days, 6:45 in the morning opening of Lidl's in West Howe. The launch of the new St Michael's Church. I've attended a 100 and a 101-year-old's birthdays. And we've also done the Christmas Day swim, which was rather chilly to say the least, but very refreshing and something I think all mayors should do, looking at certain people for future times. I don't think anyone should be allowed to jump out of it under any circumstances. It's very invigorating. Along with that, I've done several other meetings with charity groups and things like that, and I still have a few more to do before the end of my tenure. So that is my very brief report to you all for that one. And agenda item 6 is updates on assets, and I will call on Karen Tompkins, Deputy Head of Democratic Services, to present the report. Karen, sorry, have I missed one? Yeah.
I think it's item 5. Budget precept.
I don't have it. Mine goes straight to item 6. Sorry, we are doing item 5, which is the budget precept, and I will hand over for that one to be dealt with. Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Chartered Trustees. So the report starts with an update in regards to the in-year position for 21-22, which has improved since my last update in October. You may remember activity's been hampered by COVID-19, so we're sitting on quite a large underspend. So we're currently forecasting that we will contribute to reserves of 18,000, which is an overall underspend of just under 26,000, because a proportion of this year's budget was to be supported from reserves. And Appendix A details that forecast position. Appendix A also sets out the proposed detailed budget for 22-23. In preparation for this budget, we carried out a budget workshop back in December last year, where we looked at a number of key areas with the Chartered Trustees, and one of those areas was the staffing recharge, which is the cost of the head and deputy head of democratic services, the 2 PAs and the mace bearers. This year and previous years, it's been a split of 60% to the Chartered Trustees of Bournemouth and 40% to the Chartered Trustees of Poole. The democratic services have gone away. They've re-looked at that and they felt that it's actually now equitable to do a 50-50 split. That's reflective of the support for both Chartered Trustees. So that has a positive impact for the base budget of just over 10,000, which has been reflected in next year's budget. And the details of that staffing charge can be found in Appendix B to this report. The other noteworthy change to mention is we've now included a charge for the use of the vehicles. So this wasn't previously charged from BCP Council, but it will be from 22-23. It's at £2,000 per annum, and it's charged based on the useful life of the vehicle, expected maintenance and expected usage across the two Chartered Trustees and the BCP Council Chairman. So figure 1 of the report sets out the forecast reserves. So we're forecasting March this year, we will sit on just under 58,000 of reserves, which is 39% of the proposed precept for next year. So it's a healthy level. We're not proposing any use of reserves for next year's budget. So it does mean that we can deal with any unexpected income or support any activities outside the base budget. The report also updates Chartered Trustees on the tax base. So the tax base is the number of properties that we levy the council tax charge against. So the more properties we've got, the lower the Band D charge equates to. We had quite a drop-off on the tax base because of COVID-19, but we're now starting to see that bounce back. So for the Bournemouth area, the tax base is increased by 2,000 properties. So ultimately, it reduces the Band D charge. So in summary, the proposed council tax precept demand for the Chartered Trustees is £147,773, which is ever so slightly less than last year. And this equates to a Band D charge for the Chartered Trustees at £2.31, which is a reduction of 8p or 3.3% compared to last year. Consideration was given as to whether we should freeze the charge or reduce it slightly less, but considering the points I've referred to the reduction in the base budget of £10,000 because of the staffing recharge, the increase in the tax base and the healthy level of reserves, it felt justified to go for this precept. So I'll happily take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Matthew. Members, are there any questions for Matthew on the budget? No? I'm happy to go along with the budget, and I'm really pleased to see the drop in the precept for local residents. As you know, the aim of the council is to have a freeze on council tax, and this will certainly go a long way to making it show that we are keen to do this and keep it right. So Matthew, thank you to yourself and the team for this. Members, we'll take a formal vote. Is everyone in favour of accepting this, please? All those, raise your hands, show. I think that is unanimous. Thank you very much. That is taken as said. Thank you, members. And we'll now move on, this time, to item 6. And again, I will call on Karen Tompkins, Deputy Head of Democratic Services, to present the report. This is on update on assets. Thank you, Ms. Tompkins.
Many thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I can refer members to agenda item 6 and the paper circulated with your agenda, there are a number of asset issues that I would just like to update you on. The first relates to an update on the ownership of chess cups, which was something that the Chartered Trustees have previously discussed, and probably it's coming up to about 2 years ago when this was first mooted. At that time, we were unable to clarify ownership of the cups, which were used for previous Bournemouth chess competitions. We have gone back to Sir George Merrick to seek clarification, and as they purchased the cups, he's requested that they be returned to the family to enable them to continue to support any future chess competitions that actually are arranged. With that in mind, the Chartered Trustees are asked to note the position and that the cups will be removed from the Chartered Trustees Asset Register. That's the first issue. The second relates to a request from the Russell Coates Art Gallery and Museum. in respect of an exhibition that they are shortly to arrange, which is entitled The Road to the Museum, 20 Steps to the Opening of Bournemouth Cultural Gem. And it's part of the museum's centenary celebrations, and they've actually made a request for the mace and the badge, which were donated by Sir Merton and Lady Annie Russell back in 1890, to be loaned to them for the period of the exhibition. Obviously, this is a matter that we need to bring to you as the Charter Trustees. Just to highlight that it is expected that this will be for a period of approximately 8 to 9 months, but on the understanding that if the Mayoralty required the regalia back, we would obviously have it back for any civic engagements, any regalia talks, any history issues, or any sort of civic events. And obviously, the request would require the museum making appropriate security and insurance cover for the regalia during the period of the loan. So that is before the Charter Trustees to consider, and that's reflected in recommendation B. The next issue is a donation of portraits of Basil and Mabel Beckett, who were former Mayor and Mayoress of Bournemouth, Borough Council to the Charter Trustees for Bournemouth. This donation has been submitted by a family member, and again that's before you as the Charter Trustees to see if you wish to accept those portraits, on the understanding that we would display them as appropriate and include on the asset register. And the final issue is members will recall that we are required to do an annual verification of the assets within the Charter Trustees, or probably a percentage of those, and it's just to let you know that we are currently in the process of making those arrangements. So, Mr. Mayor, the recommendations relating to those issues are set out at A, B, C and D on the agenda, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mrs Tompkins. If we take each one in turn, we'll deal with them one at a time. It's probably the easiest way to go through them. So if we deal with the first one, which is to provide an update on the ownership of the chess cups, etc. Are members happy that they are now returned back to their original owners? We only had them, if you remember, when Councillor Chappell, the previous Councillor Chappell, used them for a chess competition. We used them for that 1 year only, and they've never been used since. So I think it's probably appropriate for us to return them, and I would be happy to move that we do that. Is anyone in agreement on that first item? Yep, thank you. And moving on to the second item, which is a request from the Russell Coates Arts Museum. I personally think it would be really good. At the moment, the mace and the badge are shut away in the parlour. They very rarely get seen. And I think it's an absolutely brilliant opportunity for members of the public of Bournemouth to see these items. We do have the opportunity when needed for official meetings to bring them back in. And as Ms Tompkins has said, they will be required to provide the correct security and insurance to cover for those. So again, I personally see no problem with that. And again, I would seek your support, members, to do that. Everyone happy with that again? Yep, thank you very much. Councillor Filer, over to you, because I believe you would like to speak on the third item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The third item, I haven't discussed this with anybody else, but there are a few old mayors in this room here tonight. I feel everyone, and I'm probably the oldest of all of them, because my husband was mayor back in 1984. I might not be the oldest in years, but I was certainly around in 1984. I don't think there's many others who were here at that time. All of us, as mayors of Bournemouth, automatically had portraits done, beautiful studio portraits, and they were displayed in the pavilion. I don't know if they still are, because the pavilion's been closed, but as you came in, there's like a circular corridor, and the mayoral picture was always put up there, the mayor and mayoress in full regalia. So every single mayor since, well, I think Mr. and Mrs. Beckett were mayor. I think he was back in the 1960s sometime. So it's over 50 years of mayors, and it was before that. because I remember back in the 50s, our next door neighbour was Whitelock, Councillor Whitelock. And that was certainly in the 50s, so we're talking about at least 60 studio portraits. And I just think, where are we going to put them? This is now the BCP Civic Centre. It's not the Bournemouth Town Hall anymore. And we've got the boards in the front hall which list the names of every mayor that ever was. So I think, honestly, I understand the family member who wants to give us those portraits. It seems an awful shame. What are they going to do with them? I don't know if the Becketts have passed away, but I would have guessed they had. They seemed very ancient to me at the time, and that was back in the 60s. So I think that, kind as it is and nice of them it is, I would like to suggest or to move that we don't add these to our assets, and thank them very much. Or maybe there would be room for them somewhere in the Russell Coates, this previous item. Perhaps it would be more suitable there, but I just foresee an absolute, whenever anybody moves house or dies, you're going to have a huge number of, they're big studio pictures, they're like the ones which hang in the Mayor's Parlour, and we just wouldn't have room in this building, and it would be ongoing for the future. I think it would set a precedent that perhaps we don't want to set. So that's what I would like to move.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fowler. Now, Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Fowler. I too, like every other mayor, have got one of these portraits, which languishes in my attic at the moment and probably will remain there forever. It's very impractical. You can't hang it anywhere. It's too big. And if we had every one that was ever taken, we wouldn't have any wall space for it. So I think we should probably say thank you, but no thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Coote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've also been asked a similar question, what's going to happen to all the portraits from Christchurch Town Hall, and are they coming here? And if not, the mayors that are still alive from Christchurch, perhaps contact them to see whether they want them, because I don't think, as Councillor Fowler says, we're going to put them up here, whereas they're actually on display in Christchurch Town Hall.
Thank you, Councillor Coote. I think that is a question you will have to ask Christchurch Town Council, as we as an authority here have absolutely no say over what they do with their property. It's purely down for Christchurch Town Council to sort that one out. Thank you. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that before we could make a decision on this, we need an opportunity to look at the portrait, because it might be an awful portrait that looks absolutely terrible. It might be a piece of modern art for all we know. The second point is, of course, it could be a Banksy, in which case it could be worth a lot of money. So I think we just need to take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the portraits they're on about are the standard portraits that we see. If you look outside the parlour now, there's a vile picture of myself hanging up on the wall, and basically it's just an enlarged picture of that. And I personally don't think we have the room to keep them. So my personal comments will be, it's a very, very kind thank you for the offer, but you may wish to consider offering them to the Russell Coates or to the library to see if they want to display them anywhere. But I could see us having 60 or 70 of these going back from all the previous mayors, and even the future mayors from here, myself and people going forward, will then say, well, I want my picture up there. And we don't. This is now the BCP town centre, and as much as I like to keep Bournemouth's history going, I think we do have to bear in mind we are now BCP, and we have to draw a line somewhere. And I think now is the time to draw the line on that. So we have a move from Councillor Fowler. Were you seconding that move, Councillor Williams, to say thank you but no thank you to this offer? All those in favour of that, please show. I think that's fairly unanimous. Thank you very much for that, members, much appreciated. And there is also the update on the annual verification, which we've heard from Mr. Tompkins is an ongoing thing. Are members happy with that situation? It is done over a 4-year period, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff to be done. So the mace bearers do a section at a time of everything that we own. So we're okay with that. Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. So moving on then, item 7 is the review of the risk register. And again, I will call on Ms. Tompkins to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report is circulated with your agenda papers. Just as a reminder, you last reviewed the risk register on the 25th of January last year. That's circulated attached at Appendix 1. There have been some updates on the elements of the risk register that have been completed and those that are ongoing. It's an opportunity for you to consider the risk register, review and update, and in particular, if you feel as Charter Trustees there are any emerging new risks that you would want included. There's just some key points that I've picked out at paragraph 3. I won't go into them in detail, but just highlights the historical and ceremonial assets and the loss of civic regalia. We've referred to the verification checks, and there is something there for the Charter Trustees to consider when you next wish to undertake a full valuation, because that would obviously have a cost implication. One of the risks previously was non-compliance with the financial regulations. You are aware you now have your own bespoke financial regulations, which you agreed at the meeting in January last year. And obviously the operation of the Charter Trustees is consistent with those financial regulations, taking advice as appropriate from the responsible financial officer. I've included transmission of COVID-19 infections and exposure of civic dignitaries and civic team to the virus, just by way of update. Obviously, as a civic team, during the pandemic and as we've been in lockdown and restrictions have been reviewed, it has been difficult, and we're very conscious that civic dignitaries in some respect have not been able to undertake their full activity, but we've aimed to provide and comply with government guidance and also take on board the advice of our own health and safety team, and that's continued to be the approach that we're taking. And obviously you've just considered your budget for 22-23, and that's just a highlight at 3D that we are continually doing, we are doing on an annual basis budget workshops, so there's an opportunity to consider the journey and the financial implications of the Charter Trustees. If there are any questions, Chairman, I'm happy to answer them, but it's just an opportunity to review and hopefully agree as Appendix 1.
Thank you, Ms Tompkins. Are there any questions for Ms Tompkins on this? No. I would just like to say a huge thank you to Ms Tompkins and the team, because they have gone out of their way again for myself over the last year to make sure that I've stayed safe. I've probably not been the easiest person for them because I hate wearing a mask, so there has been a few little sniffles around that one, but they have done really, really well to keep us all safe, to make sure any events that we have done have been safe and complied with. So thank you very much, Ms Tompkins, to yourself and all the team, especially the two drivers. They've been amazing. So yeah, thank you very much for that. So we will move on then, members. And the next item is the Queen's Jubilee celebrations and the beacons. And I will call on Mr Weaver, Head of Destination and Events, to introduce this item. Mr Weaver.
Thank you very much. Yes, members, you've got the report in front of you. So obviously everybody's aware this is the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations, in case anybody wasn't. And you're also aware that a lot of planning has gone into this for this year. Her Majesty and the members of the royal family will be travelling around the country to undertake a variety of engagements, and this will culminate in the Platinum Jubilee weekend in June with an extended bank holiday from the 2nd to the 5th of June. Part of those celebrations on the 2nd of June is the long-standing tradition in celebrating royal jubilees, weddings and coronations with the lighting of the beacons, and will be continued as part of this for the Platinum Jubilee. So there will be a series of beacons, as you're aware, events across the country, and the Corporate Management Board have proposed that the option of holding a beacon lighting event will be given to the Charter Trustees of Bournemouth and Poole, and obviously the Town Council of Christchurch. Applications and management will still be through the events team, but the events team will be here to assist in some of the organisation of the beacons if in each area of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. There have been events in BCP area. They haven't always, I have to be honest, attracted large audiences. One attracted 12 people to the event. So what I would say, I'm not saying this year will be an issue, but if the trustees do decide to go with it, I would say everybody needs to get behind it and support it, and I'm sure it'll be a great success if they do so. Whilst the Convention of BCP Council will help with the organisation of the event in providing appropriate stewarding and barriering and just doing risk assessments and covering all those aspects of it. There is a cost of purchasing the beacon, and that would be, I think, estimated at £500, and that would need to be met by the trustees. So really, the recommendation for you today is to consider whether you wish to take up the offer of being part of those that beacon lighting ceremony. There is the option, if you feel you don't want to, on the 2nd of June, to actually have it maybe on the alternative day at that weekend in line with another event. Obviously, the idea is it's a network of beacons all being lit up across the UK, so you miss that opportunity. So it's really here for you today to consider that offer if you wish to go ahead, and it's there for you to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Members, what do you think? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a very good idea. I do have one question for Mr. Weaver, if I may, Mr. Mayor, and that is to ask where he is considering putting the beacon. Because obviously the most obvious place is up on Hengistbury Head. And I'd like to see what his thoughts are. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I may, Councillor Anderson, we did actually talk about this a few days ago and actually came to the conclusion that Hengistbury Head is probably the worst place to have it. Reasons being, it's dark, and getting people to walk up Hengistbury Head late at night in the dark is probably not the best use of our safety people. So we had a talk about it, and we thought possibly if we go ahead with it, that the end of Boscombe Pier would be the ideal place for it, because that way it would be able to be seen from Christchurch if they do it, and it would also be able to be seen from Poole, and we would therefore be able to see Poole's one as well. So the whole idea of these beacons is that they are able to be seen around the coastline. So I think with that in mind, that would be the ideal position to have one. And it's also great from a safety point of view. Mr. Weaver was saying about not many people attending there. I have said that I will talk to local businesses to see if local businesses will sponsor a firework display to have on the same night, which, as we all know, does tend to attract a lot of people down there. So maybe we could do that. And therefore, I would really like to say, I think she deserves the celebration of her Jubilee. I don't think there's anyone that, would say not. And I would be quite happy to purchase the beacon from the Charter Trustees funds. We have enough in reserves this year to do that. And I, for one, would certainly like to see us take that up and everyone get behind it and make sure it's a really good event. Unfortunately, it won't be in my mayoral year. It just falls a week outside. But that saying, I would still like to make sure that the event goes with a bang, as it were. Any other members? David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, just from what you've said there about a firework event to attract the sort of people along, and hopefully you have productive discussions with local businesses around that, but just a point of whether some of our reserves could contribute towards that, so it may be partly sponsored and partly funded from our reserves. I don't know what cost they are for firework displays, but just a suggestion.
If members were happy for us to do that, we have enough in our reserves, Matthew, to be able to do that. If that way, we would say it is solely a Chartered Trustees event, and we wouldn't have to rely on other businesses. I know all businesses are struggling for money at the moment, and I personally think if members are happy to do that, I certainly would be happy to do it. I think it's a great idea. I thank you for that. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd support that as going from ours. I mean, with the beacons bringing something, if we're going to make sure that we're going to get value for money and get people there and get the residents involved, then yeah, let's do something. My only request would be maybe to think of something besides fireworks and have it maybe go with slightly less of a bang and perhaps something a bit more, different, but just something to have a think on. Thank you.
We can have a look at that. Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very supportive of this celebration for Her Majesty, and I think it's really important that we do absolutely all we can do. So really happy to support the suggestion that we contribute some of our reserves. Equally, I think your idea of getting local businesses to support could help to make it go even further, and quite often we find match funding is often the lever to bring people to the table. So we can put a plea out, can't we, to get some headline sponsors for what should be a really big event. Just on that, and actually I'm really glad that you brought the idea of the pier up, because I had a similar idea and then worried about putting fire on piers and it going wrong in the past, but I'm sure it'd be absolutely fine. But we do at the end of Bournemouth Pier have a beacon in and of itself with the very tall tower, and I just wondered, without going a bit too extreme, whether there was a possibility of looking into the beacon being on top of that tower, because if we're looking for visual impact, nowhere could we get more than that. And I know that the Town Council in Christchurch are very kindly getting Reed Steel to sponsor a not small steel structure as well. So if we could get one even bigger, then that would be great. But just an idea that we might want to explore.
I think we could do that, Councillor Broadhead, as long as you volunteer to go up the top, light it, and then slide down the zip wire afterwards, dropping off halfway along.
He will.
Oh no, he would, wouldn't he? I've never known anyone do nothing for a picture. Councillor Filer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd just like to say how supportive I am. I mean, it really is unique. We are really fortunate, all of us, to be here with a 70th year on the reign of a monarch. It's something none of us will see again, and none of our children will see again. I mean, the Queen was in her 20s, and she's now an amazing lady in the mid-90s. And when you think of the people who follow, none of us will see this. I don't know if it's the first time. Historians amongst you will know better.
First time ever.
But what an exciting thing. And the fact that only 12 turned up in the past, it probably wasn't an event of this stature. I mean, this is really amazing, and I think we need to involve our school children, because for them, it's something that they will remember. And I'm absolutely 100% behind it.
Thank you. Councillor Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to be on board with this as well. I think it's a really brilliant idea, and I think Councillor Broadhead's idea as well of the highest point is commendable. And but just in case, if we have an unofficial backup plan, if I could suggest one, if it falls in the sea, then I'm sure the residents of Kinston would be the unofficial backup place to have that beacon. So I'd like to just put that out there, but I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Thank you, members. It's really nice to get the support for this. I think it's really important that we as a town do something and we show the residents that we are happy to celebrate this. So thank you for that. And are all members in favour of us contributing something from the reserves to do this, whether it be half of it or everything else? Thank you, members. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Weaver, for that. And you've heard that we're all keen. So if you can keep us in the loop with everything, and we'll help with you on making arrangements and things. Thank you very much for the report. Much appreciated. So, members, moving on to the final item on tonight's agenda, something about nomination for mayor for next year. Something? Ms. Tompkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just report, obviously, Charter Trustees are aware that a letter went out prior to Christmas seeking nominations for the civic role of Mayor of Bournemouth for 2022-23. The closing date for those nominations was last Monday, the 17th of January at noon. And by the closing date, we had received one nomination. And if I can report, that nomination is Councillor Bob Lawton for that position, and therefore, as it is contested, we don't need to go through any ballot process.
As it isn't contested.
Sorry, as it isn't contested, slip of the tongue, we don't need to go through any ballot process. But if I can advise, obviously the formal vote will be taken at the mayor-making meeting of the Charter Trustees on the 27th of May.
Thank you.
So this is purely for Charter Trustees information at this stage.
And whilst it is for our information only, could I ask Councillor Lawton whether he would be prepared to accept that nomination when it comes forward at the annual council? Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd be proud and privileged to accept that nomination. Can I just say that I'm very proud humbled and delighted to be the Mayor-designate for Bournemouth. It will be a great privilege and honour to serve the residents of Bournemouth and look after the residents of Bournemouth and promote Bournemouth to the best of my ability. Can I just say, while I'm on my feet, that I would like to thank all the people who have supported me ever since I've been a councillor since 2007, and certainly when I put my name forward, the people who have come forward and emailed me and texted me privately to say how much they support me, and it's been quite humbling actually. You don't realise just how much people, I hate to use the word respect you. None of us realise that as we go through life. Can I just thank Councillor Mellor for his strong support towards me. That's been really wonderful. One of the most humbling things about being taken and accepting this position is that you follow in the shoes of some great people who I've seen since my time as being mayor. I've seen Anne was the first mayor I ever seen, and she was a wonderful mayor. There's been some superb ones. There's been some not so superb, but you know that life goes up and down as we know. Can I just say that Dave, or Councillor Kelsey, this year has been absolutely outstanding. He's been a wonderful mayor in difficult circumstances, and I'm proud and privileged to follow in his footsteps. And I would like to thank everybody within this room for this great honour which you bestow upon me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orton. Members, that draws us to the end of this meeting this afternoon. Thank you all for attending, and look forward to you all. A quick reminder that officially at the moment, mayor making is the 27th of May, Friday the 27th of May. So if you can all keep that date free in your diaries, that is a date that you all need to be turning up for wherever we end up having it this year. And hopefully it won't be in a cold room in Poole. It'll be somebody nice. No disrespect to Poole, but your room over there is very cold. So thank you very much, members, and good evening to you all.